And tonight we're learning what another president might have thought, and that's Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan's daughter, Patty Davis, has an opinion piece in the Washington Post titled, "My Father, Ronald Reagan, Would Never Have Stood for This." Patty Davis joins me now. Good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us, Patty.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You just heard what President Carter, his comments about President Trump. Former presidents don't often speak out about the current one, the sitting president. But President Trump seems to be testing that practice. What do you think your father would have to say?
I think my father would be appalled, but I think he would also be really heartbroken at where this country has come to and where we have sunk to. And I think he would be frightened at the use of the word enemy toward the media. The word enemy is really a very strategic word if you think about it, because if you call someone the enemy, you've dehumanized them. You've made them into a target, really. And I think it's even broader than just calling the media the enemy. You've stoked fear in people. You've stoked fear in this country just by invoking the word enemy. I heard a quote years ago that I believe was attributed to Ceausescu, the Romanian dictator who was executed in '89. I'm not 100% positive it was Ceausescu, so don't hold me to that. But the quote was, "You can do whatever you want if you keep the people frightened enough." And I think that is the agenda of this administration. And I think my father would see it that way, because my father, unlike this president, knew history. He knew what happened in Nazi Germany. He knew what has happened historically in Russia and in other tyrannical regimes.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting when you talked to us, the first time I thought about this, he calls the press the enemy of the people, and then he calls Russia a competitor.
Yeah.
I mean, he thinks the press is worse
Yeah.
than Russia or someone like Vladimir Putin, who's a dictator and has people murdered in his country. And listen to the way he talks about the press. Watch this.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by.
How dangerous is this tone?
I think it's incredibly dangerous because, here's the thing. Donald Trump and the people around him told us what they were going to do. Steve Bannon talked about blowing things up and tearing things down and deconstructing the administrative state or something like that. It was something deconstructing something. They told us what they were going to do. Donald Trump stood in front of people, the press, America, and talked about how bad America was right now, and he alone could fix it. They told us what they were going to do. In the same way that in Nazi Germany, Hitler told people what they were going to do and assumed that no one was going to get in his way. And Donald Trump has assumed that no one would get in his way. And so far, if you look at the silence of Congress, he's right.
What do you think about
our system of go on.
What do you think about the Republican Party now? Because the Republican, people behind closed doors, as you know, or away from cameras or recordings, people will say, "I don't agree with this. I can't believe he's doing that," and they have disdain for what the president's doing. But no one will say it publicly. What do you think about the Republican Party now?
I think it's so cowardly. It's like they all turned into eunuchs. I apologize to any eunuchs out there who are offended by that comparison, but but they really have. It doesn't matter what you say behind closed doors. It matters what you say out in public to this country. That's what people elected you to do, to speak to us.
There's always been tension between.
And go on.
There's always been tensions between the presidents and the press. Your father, no exception. But you say he tried to reach compromises with the media. Explain that.
Well, the example that I gave in this piece was up at his ranch. they had long lenses up on a hillside, way far away from the ranch house, but they could see actually into the ranch house. And, you know, he said, well, this is not going to do. I mean, they can't. This is really an intrusion. So we have to reach a compromise. But before they came to that compromise, he stepped outside of the ranch house, swayed like something was wrong with him, clutched his chest, and fell to the ground
right?
and stayed there for a couple of seconds. It felt like he was having a heart attack. And then stood up and smiled and waved at them up on the hill, right? The Secret Service was in on this prank, otherwise they would all have been rushed to hospitals with heart attacks or something, you know? So he did have a sense of humor about it.
Yeah.
But he also had enormous respect for the press. And, you know, in the Iran-Contra scandal, he initially came in front of the press, came in front of America, and said there were no arms for hostages. And I think it was like the next day that Ed Meese came to him with a document and said, actually, Mr. President, we found out there were. He went back in front of the press, I think that night.
Yeah.
He went back in front of the country and back in front of the media and said, I sincerely believe that I was right in what I told you yesterday, but as it turns out, I was wrong.
Well, that would not happen with this administration. They'll figure out a way to say that
No, it
the
wouldn't.
information you have
But
is
that's
wrong, and
showing-
they'll say the intelligence is not accurate about that.